Hello, and welcome to our podcast episode number 75, The Ultimate Guide to Quitting Your Job and Getting Away with It. I'm Thomas, and as always, here with me, my friend Timothy. Today, we are going to talk about a film called Office Space. There will be spoilers. Office Space is a 1999 American satirical black comedy film about a software company where employees become frustrated and decide to take revenge on their bosses by stealing money from the accounting system. They eventually reconcile after finding out the person they thought was involved wasn't, but one of them burns down the building before they can be caught. To start with, I quite liked the film. But Tim, did you enjoy Office Space?
I can't say I disliked it, Thomas, but I was expecting more from a comedy film. It had some decent moments, and the premise of employees taking revenge on their bosses is always amusing. But overall, I think the movie lacks the wit that other comedies have. That being said, I do appreciate how well it portrays the mundanity of office work. The daily grind can be quite soul-crushing, and Office Space captures that feeling quite effectively.
So in that sense,
I guess you could say it was an accurate representation of modern work life.
I see where you're coming from, Tim. It certainly had a lot of relatable moments for anyone who has ever worked in an office. But for me, those moments were enough to make the film enjoyable. I also thought the actors did a great job. Ron Livingston and Jennifer Aniston are both quite charming, and Gary Cole's portrayal of the boss was spot on. In fact, I think one of my favorite parts of the movie is when he asks Peter to come into his office for a few minutes and then proceeds to keep him there for hours.
Yes, Gary Cole was certainly convincing as the annoying boss, and I agree with you about the other actors. They were all quite good in their roles. But for me, it wasn't enough to save the film from being just another average comedy.
Fair enough, Tim. We both have our opinions, and that's what makes these discussions so interesting.
So, Tom, now that we've shared our initial thoughts on Office Space, I have a question for you. In your opinion, which character in the film is the most relatable?
I think for me, it would be Peter Gibbons. He starts out as a frustrated and unmotivated employee who hates his job, but eventually decides to take matters into his own hands. It's a journey that many people can relate to, especially when they are stuck in a dead-end job.
I see your point, Tom. But for me, it would be Milton Wadhams. He's the quiet and unassuming character who is constantly being overlooked and mistreated by his coworkers and bosses. It's a story that many people in similar situations can identify with.
I guess we both have our favorites then. Now, let's dive deeper into the film and explore some of its more interesting aspects in our next segment.
Certainly, Tom. So let's discuss some of the key moments and themes from Office Space. One of the most prominent aspects of the film is its critique on modern office culture. The movie portrays a work environment where employees are overworked, undervalued, and micromanaged to the point of insanity. This is exemplified through characters like Peter Gibbons, Michael Bolton, and Samir Najin Nanajar, who all feel trapped in their jobs and seek ways to break free from the monotony. Another important theme in Office Space is the idea of rebellion against authority figures. The three main characters decide to take matters into their own hands when they realize that their bosses are not only incompetent but also corrupt. They decide to sabotage the company's accounting system as a form of revenge for years of mistreatment. This act of defiance is both humorous and cathartic, allowing viewers to empathize with their plight while also enjoying the absurdity of their actions. Additionally, the film touches on themes of friendship and loyalty among coworkers who are otherwise disconnected from each other due to their jobs. Throughout the movie, we see Peter develop a closer bond with Michael and Samir as they plan their heist together. These friendships provide much-needed support for the characters during their time of rebellion against Initech.
You're right, Tim. Those are some important themes in Office Space. I also think that the film does a great job at balancing humor with social commentary on work life. It manages to satirize certain aspects of office culture without being too heavy-handed or preachy. The use of deadpan humor and absurd situations helps to keep the movie lighthearted and entertaining despite its critiques on modern work environments. Another interesting aspect of Office Space is how it portrays technology in a negative light. While computers are supposed to make our lives easier, they often end up creating more problems for Peter and his colleagues. From constantly crashing programs to the infamous printer that never seems to work properly, technology serves as both a source of frustration and an obstacle for the characters throughout the film. Lastly, I want to discuss one of my favorite parts of the movie when Peter discovers his newfound freedom after quitting his job. The scene where he drives off in his boss's Porsche while listening to Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones is both hilarious and liberating for him. It shows that sometimes breaking free from our daily grinds can lead us towards better things in life, even if it means taking risks or making mistakes along the way. So what do you think about these themes and moments in Office Space, Tim? Do you have any other insights to share with our viewers?
Well, Thomas, I must admit that you've brought up some interesting points about Office Space and its various themes. One thing I found particularly fascinating was the fact that the film was inspired by Mike Judge's own experiences working in a software company. In an interview, he mentioned how many of the characters were based on people he knew during his time there. This adds an extra layer of authenticity to the movie, as it feels like we are getting a glimpse into a real-life work environment rather than just another Hollywood satire. Another interesting tidbit is that the film's original title was Milton. The story revolved solely around Milton Wadhams and his journey through life, both inside and outside of Initech. However, during production, it became clear that focusing on one character wasn't enough to carry the entire movie. So they decided to expand the narrative to include Peter Gibbons and their shared experiences at work. This change ultimately led to a more balanced story with multiple perspectives on office life. In terms of trivia about Office Space itself, did you know that there were several scenes which were improvised by the actors? One such instance is when Milton enters Peter's cubicle looking for his stapler and finds him asleep at his desk. Instead of simply leaving or waking Peter up, Milton decides to cover him with a blanket and sit next to him until he wakes up. This heartwarming moment was completely unscripted, with both actors deciding on the spot what they should do in that situation. Another improvised scene occurs when Samir discovers his name has been misspelled on their office door plaque as Samir Nasseri. He proceeds to angrily rip off the Nasseri part, only to reveal that it was actually spelled correctly all along. His real last name is Nagina Najjar. This hilarious exchange between actors A.J. Naidu and Diedrich Bader added an extra layer of comedy to the film without disrupting its overall narrative or themes. So there you have it, Thomas. Some fascinating tidbits about Office Space and how its characters were inspired by real life experiences, as well as some improvised moments that ended up adding to the film's charm. I think it just goes to show how sometimes even small changes or spontaneous decisions can impact a project in big ways.
That's very interesting, Tim. I didn't know about those improvised scenes. It just goes to show how talented the actors were and their ability to enhance the film with their own ideas. Speaking of the script, one thing that struck me was the way it balanced humor and drama throughout the movie. There are moments where we laugh out loud at Peter's antics or Milton's misunderstandings, but there are also scenes like when Michael Bolton reveals his true feelings about being fired, which add depth to their characters and make them more relatable. The film does an excellent job of blending these two elements without ever feeling forced or awkward. In terms of direction, I think Mike Judge did a fantastic job capturing the essence of office life while also adding his own unique touches to it. For example, the use of slow-motion shots during some key moments adds a surreal quality to them, which helps emphasize their importance in Peter's journey. The pacing of the film is also quite masterful. It never feels rushed or dragged out, which allows us as viewers to fully immerse ourselves into these characters' world without getting bored or losing interest. Lastly, I want to discuss one aspect that really stood out for me: the soundtrack selection for Office Space. The music choices perfectly complement each scene they are featured in and help set the tone for what's happening on screen. From classic rock anthems like Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones during Peter's triumphant exit from Initech to more mellow tracks like Funky Town by Lipsync. Each song adds something special to that particular moment in the film. It's clear that a lot of thought and care went into selecting these songs, which contributes greatly towards making Office Space such an enjoyable watch overall. So what do you think about the script direction and soundtrack choices for Office Space, Tim? Do you have any other insights or opinions on these aspects of the film?
Well, Thomas, you're right about the soundtrack for Office Space being exceptional. Each song is carefully chosen and perfectly suits the scene it accompanies. It adds another layer of depth to the film by setting the mood and atmosphere for each moment. The use of classic rock songs like Satisfaction during Peter's liberation from Initech or Love is Strange when he first meets Joanna really helps convey his emotional state at those particular points in the story. Additionally, some of the more obscure tracks like Codex by The Refreshment serve as a kind of inside joke for fans who might recognize it from one of the film's most memorable scenes involving a fax machine. Overall, I think Mike Judge did an incredible job with both selecting and integrating these songs into Office Space, which adds significantly to its charm and rewatchability. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the actors in more detail. As we've mentioned before, Ron Livingston was absolutely perfect as Peter Gibbons. He captures both his relatable frustration with office life and his sense of wonder when he starts to question the status quo. Jennifer Aniston also delivers a fantastic performance as Joanna, adding depth and vulnerability to what could have been a one-dimensional character. Gary Cole's portrayal of Bill Lumberg is iconic for good reason. His deadpan delivery and bumbling demeanor make him both hilarious and somewhat sympathetic at times. The supporting cast, including Stephen Root, David Herman, AJ Naidoo, Diedrich Bader, and Paul Wilson, all bring their prime game to the table as well, which helps elevate Office Space above your typical workplace comedy. One thing I really appreciate about this film is how it showcases not only the struggles of employees, but also the complexities of their relationships with each other. The dynamic between Peter and his friends, Michael and Samir, adds an extra layer of warmth and camaraderie that helps ground the story even when things get dark or absurd. Similarly, Joanna's connection to Peter serves as both a source of conflict and personal growth for him throughout his journey out of Initech. Lastly, I want to touch upon Mike Judge's directing choices, which further enhance Office Space's impact on the viewer. The use of slow motion during key moments not only adds drama, but also allows us to savor those precious instances where Peter seems to be truly happy or free from his workplace woes. Additionally, Judge does an excellent job capturing mundane details like long walks between buildings or waiting in line for coffee, which help create a sense of realism within this otherwise absurd world. This attention to detail, combined with strong writing, acting performances, and music selection, make Office Space not only a classic comedy, but also a thought-provoking commentary on modern work life.
Well, Tim, I think we've covered quite a bit about Office Space and its various aspects, from the cultural commentary on work life to the film's influence on pop culture. It's fascinating how this movie manages to balance humor with social commentary while also exploring themes like rebellion against authority figures, friendship, and loyalty among co-workers who would otherwise be disconnected due to their jobs. The use of deadpan humor and absurd situations helps keep the movie light-hearted, entertaining despite its critiques on modern work environments. As we discussed before, Office Space serves as an important piece of pop cultural commentary while also being a classic comedy film that can watched multiple times without getting old or boring us. Its impact on viewers through its unique blend of humor and social commentary, which continues to resonate with audiences even after all these years. The film's timelessness with the pop culture will continue to be relevant in future as well, because it explores themes that work environment where employees are overworked and micromanaged by a group of people who work for a living in a small production company. This show is why not only few days later they released a new movie series podcast discuss their favorite filmmakers who have worked together for more than 25 years in the years. It's a lifetime. The Office Space has been discussed before, with pop culture that they've been disconnected from workplace and film, and also TV shows that they have been there while making but life. They are currently working on television and radio as a movie producer at his favorite show while living in the 2000s production. They've been a podcasting, a music video game before playing board series. They wrote an article and a film that they've been working on TV series, a magazine and web series, and movies, a TV show and radio and a movie and a pop series. They have written a TV series, a production in theater and web series and movies, a television and TV series, a podcast. They wrote a musician, a movie and film that they've decided to be released a podcast, a film review. They a movie and TV show and television and radio and podcasting, a movie and podcast and a TV, a film and theater, a production and TV and movies, a podcast and radio and TV, a movie and movie. And movies, a radio and magazine, and movies, a podcast, and TV shows, a podcast and magazine. The radio and movies, a podcast and a podcasts, and music and movies, a podcast and movie and movies, and movies, a podcast and movies, and the podcast and movies and film and television, and movies and television and movies, a podcast and movie and a podcast and TV series. He was an American actress. And television shows, a podcast show, a podcasting, a podcast, movies, a youngs. Two women, a television and movies, the show searchment, movies, move sanded, move sensifans, podcast for their lives in the TV and a movie. They film. Pod.
Well, Thomas, I think it's safe to say that Office Space is one of those rare films that manages to be both entertaining and thought-provoking at the same time. It captures the essence of modern work life while also poking fun at its absurdities. The characters are relatable yet unique in their own way, and the acting is top-notch. As for me, I give Office Space a 9 out of 10 stars rating. It's not without flaws. Some might find it too slow or predictable, but overall, I think it's an excellent film that deserves to be watched more than once. What about you, Thomas?
Do you have any final thoughts on the movie before we move on to our next topic?
Yes, Tim. I agree with your assessment of the film. Office Space is a classic in my opinion, and one that I can watch over and over again. It's funny, insightful, and captures the struggles of working in an office environment perfectly. For me, it's a 7 out of 10 stars rating, but that doesn't take away from the fact that this movie has become a cult classic for good reason. Moving forward, let's discuss our plans for tomorrow's episode. We have been throwing around ideas about what film to review next, but nothing concrete has emerged yet. Do you have any suggestions or requests from our viewers that we should consider?
I've received a few emails from viewers asking us to do a deep dive into the works of Quentin Tarantino. It could be interesting to compare his early films like Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction with his more recent ones like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or Django Unchained. What do you think, Thomas? Would that be something our audience would enjoy?
That's an excellent idea, Tim. Quentin Tarantino is one of the most influential filmmakers of our time, and I think it would be fascinating to explore his career through a retrospective lens. We could also discuss his unique style and use of violence in his films, as well as his controversial subject matter. It'll make for a great conversation. So there you have it, folks. Tomorrow on Tim and Tom's Film Nights, we will be discussing the works of Quentin Tarantino. Be sure to leave us your thoughts and suggestions in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss any future episodes. Until then, happy viewing and stay tuned for more interesting discussions about films on our channel.